Hello, Patreon folks. Thank you so much for being part of the Patreon. I have a little clip show for you this week with some extra history and a little gossipy goodness. I've got pieces of my conversation with Steve Ammidown, which on the whole, like the whole episode recording, was pretty long. This is because when romance nerds start talking, we talk a lot. We take a lot of tangents. And then I have some clips from a prior RT Rewind episode that I thought were a bit too far afield to put on the main episode. Thank you so much for being part of the podcast Patreon, and thank you for being so much fun to share these extras with. Enjoy the show.
And I think this was run through a vanity press.
Yeah, I noticed that.
So it's like Atelier Publishing.
Atelier Publishing. I was like, oh, that sounds like a vanity press.
Yeah.
Which, you know what? More power to Catherine Falk, because she also welcomed self-published authors when they were still addressed with the stigma of vanity presses, and they had their own signings. So, more power to her. And
at this time, too, she was doing that. Into the sort of early to mid-90s, she was, working with people like Genesis Press and Odyssey Books and these sort of out-of-left field indie companies at a time when, most people wouldn't touch the books.
Yep.
Which, again, she's this fascinating, complicated lady who did so much for the genre. Whether she meant to or not, or whether anybody sort of asked her to.
You could do a whole documentary series just on her, because there are news accounts of her, like people in the newspaper on the record saying, "Oh yeah, I did something she didn't like, and she assaulted me at a party." Right. What? I mean, she once called me up to yell at me because she didn't like Smart Bitches and she didn't like what we were doing. So she yelled at me on the phone one day at work.
Somehow I'm not surprised.
No one I have ever told that to was surprised.
Yeah. And, I for better or worse, have never actually dealt directly with her. When I was at Bowling Green several years ago, we were lucky enough to get RT's photo archive.
Yeah.
And it was through sort of the back channels as she was shutting down the magazine.
Yeah.
So I had this sort of front row seat to watching all that unfold. Although even I didn't know it was all coming to an end. It just sort of showed up on our doorstep on a pallet one day.
They didn't even tell you in advance, hey, there's a pallet?
But we had an idea of the size that was coming, but we didn't know why. We weren't sure of why they were.
Well, she didn't tell anybody.
No.
She just announced it at the conference, this is it.
Yep.
And I had heard it before she announced it by 24 hours. And that was from one of the people at RT.
Yeah. And some of these, Jane Bentley was her sort of second publishing effort with McFadden, which was this it seems very fly by night. It was around for a few years.
Yeah.
And if you look at some of the articles about collecting romance from the 80s, they've priced those books, the Jane Bentley McFadden books, as the most expensive romance novels. Wow. At that point, they priced them at $250 or something ridiculous.
Wow.
Which that's there's never been a formalized collector's market for romance, and that's one of the reasons why.
Yeah, it's very hard.
Just kind of put their own put their own values.
You can see that with the Christina Dodd 3-armed cover. Sometimes you can get it for $2, and then somebody will put Castles in the Sky with the 3 arms for $150.
Right,
rare,
exactly.
Limited edition. It's not that limited. I have 2, so it's not that limited. I'm just a rando with 2 of them. And then there were in the 94 issue, they were doing a 100th. A commemorative edition of a line. It might have been Harlequin Temptation. And they did a special hardcover bound edition, but it was free if you were a member. So you got this special collector's hardcover. If you were a subscriber to that line, you would get the free hardcover.
And one of the things, just to sidetrack, is that for collectors, unless you find that ad, you don't know why that book exists.
No, you don't know why there's this random book.
Fascinating.
And if it was a free gift, then it's not going to have a barcode. It probably has an ISBN, but it's a weird one. Yeah.
Yeah. It's not going to have a price on it. It's, it's going to be a weird one-off. There's a sampler that Love Swept put out in the early days that's like that. There's no barcode. There's no ISBN. It's just selections from each of the books.
Yeah. Little literary sisters. She really was making a sorority out of romance, wasn't she?
It sounds a little more like a convent or something, like an order of some sort.
Well, I mean, the strict expectations of personal conformity in convents and sororities have a significant amount of overlap there. So we're both right.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Wow. It's fun to network with authors. Here's us in front of a Indian carving. Okay.
It would be a cigar Indian.
Yes, that is exactly what that is. Wow, yeah. This is a time capsule.
Yeah.
This is like activism and networking and indoctrination into the poor us romance language.
Yeah, and I think, again, that idea that romance needed activism.
Yeah.
Which, I get the desire, but it wasn't, I think in 1989, a thing that was entirely necessary for the books that existed at the time, right? Like, they sold, they were, at this point, mostly just the big name publishers were in it. Mm-hmm. If you published a book, it generally sold enough copies that you made a little money.
Because there weren't that many other books.
Right, exactly.
Excuse me.
And then on 324, we go back to this idea of reaching out to authors, and there's an actual directory of the authors featured in the book.
Just wow.
And it varies. Some of it is, Dag Hammarskjöld Plaza. Some of it's,
P.O. Box.
Warner Brothers, 666 Fifth Avenue, which always makes me laugh. But then there's like Route 1, Box 351 in Waycross, Georgia.
Yep.
Judith McNaught's rural route address, and Rebecca Brandywine, and all of these things.
All right, Brenda Joyce. See bookmark on back cover. With each historical romance, I print a special hunk bookmark, as the readers call them. No head, just a sexy body. I live in Europe, but write to me care of romantic times. So Brenda Joyce, living her life in Europe, making bookmarks of headless hot guys for each release.
And I think my copy doesn't have it, but I think there were originally bookmarks attached to this.
Oh, that's nifty.
That were like perforated.
Right.
Yeah.
And this cardstock does make sense to have that in here because this cardstock works. Wow.
Yeah, I don't think you'll find a copy that has them, but
no, definitely
it was
not.
kind of a neat, like, again, like bookmarks. Yeah, so like, here's Jane Ann Krentz's newsletter.
Yep.
That's pair of Jesco in Bloomfield, New Jersey, who were also Nora Roberts. I don't know if they were a PR firm or like a clearinghouse or what it was. Yeah.
What the hell is Jesco in Bloomfield? I used to live right next door to Bloomfield.
Little did you know.
Little did I know.
There's Bertrice Small. Do I have bookmarks?
Oh, do you know that I met her at a signing out on the outer end of Long Island? That island is long. And I went to a book signing, and my son, who's now in college, was a toddler. And she was very taken with the fact my husband and my son had come out and were just toddling around while I did the book signing. And then, hand to heaven, she invited me back to her house to see her etchings. Literally, do you want to come to my house and see my etchings? And I had to keep a straight face. I had to not be like, okay. I did not laugh at her face. And then I saw her office, and the pink carpet covered my ankles. It was so plush. And her library of research, especially because she wrote a lot of tutors, her library of research books was like books I would be afraid to touch. They were so old. It was incredible. It was one of the weirdest but coolest experiences of my entire career.
Was her husband still alive at that point?
He was still alive. He was, I think, mostly only on the first floor, but he was delighted to meet my son and my husband. Like he was still with it. He was definitely into talking to Alex, who was probably like 2 and a half. But yeah.
because he was her manager.
Yes.
He was a professional photographer who quit his day job to be her manager, and that was a real story. Reading some of that.
Oh yeah,
yeah. There is actually a profile of a number of romance authors in Life magazine. Oh, now I can't find it.
Oh, I think I saw some PDFs of this. It was like the life and it was like lifestyles of the rich and famous, but it was romance authors.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
I can't find there was a website that had preserved it, but it does include a picture of Bertrice and her husband. There's Kathleen Woodiwiss and her son. There's a great picture of Rosemary Rogers reclining on her bed.
I've seen that picture.
Yeah, and Danielle Steele with her porcelain dog.
Oh, of course.
I'm still not sure if it's actually a real dog or not. I look at it every once in a while, don't know if that's real. Is it a hairless dog? Is it porcelain? I don't know.
So you wanted to look at 332 book search services. I love that this is a whole business enterprise.
This is so fascinating, and I wish I had been a grown-up then, so that I could have run one of these book search services. So this is it's 4 or 5 pages of people who will look for books. So you would send them a list, and they would hunt them down one way or the other, and then you would buy the books from them. And it wasn't just romance; it was, everything. But especially at this point, early Mills and Boon and early Harlequin would have been really hard to find in the 80s unless you knew somebody. Mm-hmm. Canadian Harlequins especially. You can find sort of early U.S. Harlequins. You can actually identify them because they have a 5-number series on the front. So it starts with a 5, and those were the Simon and Schuster U.S. versions.
Oh, wow. But unless you're a collector or very fluent in this, you're not going to know that. And you don't know that. Exactly. You're not going to know that there might be other books that could be worth quite a bit to a reader. You're going to have no idea.
Yeah. And some of these even advertise sort of a help a bitch out kind of idea of give us sort of the idea of the book, and we can help you figure it out, which again, was a service. RT did it as well.
Oh yes. Where, the book sleuth.
People would write in.
I was very excited. I'm oh, I love it. I'm not the only one whose brain is like that.
It's the librarian mindset. It really is.
This is why I'm not a librarian, because I'd be oh yeah, that one book, it was blue.
Yeah.
I know which one.
Blue had the fancy writing on it.
Yeah, it had some swirlies, maybe some impression in it. Yeah. It
was by that lady who did that thing.
Oh, welcome to my brain. It's like you've spoken to me. Oh, we have a picture with some people here on page 340. You wanted to look at 341, but we've got a picture of Mallory Dornhart, Kimberly Cates. There's a typo in Kimberly, I think. Jude Devereaux, bless her heart. Ruth Langan, and Linda Marrow behind them. Wow.
Yep. And that was from Phoenix, 1989.
Wow. Look at all that.
And they have their bowling trophy.
Their RT bowling trophies.
Yeah.
Say what you will about RWA. If you won their award, it was a very unique, heavy ass award. And it was the only one that looked like that.
Yeah.
It didn't look like a bowling trophy.
The very first ones kind of did.
Yeah.
The very earliest Rita plaques, which actually spelled out romance is treasured always, which is how I figured out that Rita in the RWA award was an acronym.
Treasured always.
And not just someone's name.
Someone's name.
It also was.
Right.
It was Rita Clay Estrada.
Rita Clay Estrada. They changed the name again this year because they're not going to name it after...
Oh, they're actually doing the awards again this year?
They're doing awards, and they're not calling it the Vivian. They've changed the name again.
That's probably for the best.
Yeah.
Are they doing a librarian award?
I have no idea.
Did they say if they're doing any of this? Because I am still from 2019 the reigning librarian of the year for RWA.
Mazel tov.
I've carried the mantle for 5 years.
You're the librarian of the year forever.
Forever.
That's a really big responsibility, Steve.
It is.
You got your MLS. Did you think you'd have to carry that title for so long?
No, no idea. No idea.
So moving on to page 16, there is a two-page spread, Lifestyles of the Rich and Romantic at Home with Cassie Edwards. And it's this whole article sort of setting Cassie Edwards up as this really wealthy, successful writer of romance. And here's a picture of her house, and here's a picture of her pool. And she bought her son a bar in town, and he opened the bar. I will tell you that I looked it up, and it has a 2.5-star Yelp average, but also it was sold to somebody else. If you look, I could go, there's like some blood quantum about whether one of her relatives was a full-blooded Native American. Like it's a weird thing. But on page 17, there's a picture of Cassie Edwards at her computer. Look at that computer.
It used to be so big.
It's like a small CRT TV with disk drives next to it and an attached keyboard. And you know, that was like cutting edge technology. That was probably like a $9,000 machine or something.
Jesus Christ.
Isn't that incredible?
I remember like seeing like, oh, you can bring them with you to work. And they're like these giant boxes that you would put this computer in. And I'm like, I don't know, like how anyone's bringing those back and forth.
I do not know. But I also can tell you that there was a Cassie Edwards International Festival at her hometown in June of 1994. And Steve Sandelis, the Topaz Man, was the special guest for a book signing. And he was autographing his hot calendar. I wonder if the Topaz Man calendar is available online somewhere. Ooh. On page 8, Flavia Knightsbridge, who I believe was described in a later issue as elusive socialite, has a 2-page spread in 1994. Unless Flavia Knightsbridge is a pseudonym and more than one person have written this column, this is a 2-page spread about publishing gossip.
Do you think if you ever track down Kathy Robin?
Kath Robin?
Do you think
Kathy would absolutely know. Kathy, I hope you are out there and I can find you. I know I used to email her or call her because we had breakfast together at a diner on Route 3. Like, how did we? I have to find Kathy if she is still on this earth. So yeah, 2-page spread for elusive socialite Flavia Knightsbridge. Now, given that we read about Flavia judging the American Title contest in what was 2004, 2005?
Yeah.
And this is 1994. I wonder if it's a pseudonym and they had other people. You're going to write the publishing gossip column. Here's all the sources for it. That's my thought. Yeah. And you also noticed something real cringy.
Yeah. On page 9, at the very tail end of the 2-page spread.
Yeah, I noticed this.
They talk about Ebony Snow's ethnic romance Beguiled is off to a booming start. And I don't like the phrase ethnic romance.
Yeah, it means black. If you weren't sure, what they're talking about here is a black author in a book with black characters.
Yes. They're talking about how, like, it looks like it's been optioned because there's a producer involved.
Who is the daughter of, when this was optioned, Pamela Poitier was the executive producer, who's the daughter of Sidney Poitier.
And they're like, oh, this will be a feather in the cap for Zebra's African-American multicultural line. I was like, I feel like any book getting optioned for a TV or movie should be a boon for the publisher as a whole and not like, oh, just for this line.
There is still this even when we go forward and back in time, there are always these, even with the Brenda Jackson profile last month, there's this sort of low-key subtext of shock that Black people read books. Like, they're just shocked. Like, this is amazing. This ethnic romance has been optioned by Sidney Poitier's daughter. And like, this isn't a surprise. I don't understand how you're still surprised by this. So wild.
Yep.